so I don't get in trouble with the rest of the group here. All right. Um, okay, and then I explained this formula to you that they use to compute quarter wave antennas and half wave antennas. And it's kind of useful. It's kind of fast, but nobody remembers if it's 246 or whatever the number is, or 486. But again, if I were you, I would know this question. That's my advice to you. Okay, and the answer is 8.65 feet. All right, and the other issue is, remember that the results that they give you on the exam are rounded off. Okay, so they don't. Sorry guys, that's everybody telling me that they caught this jammer and they're all excited. You know, we need to get out more as amateur radio operators. Anyway, they approximate the answers and you know, make note of that. All right, mobile HF antennas. So obviously, if John Seymour drove up to this young lady's house in his beautiful Mercedes-Benz, brand new, and he had a 30-meter antenna, which is about 100 feet, going straight up from the rear bumper of his Mercedes, I doubt that he would get a date. Okay, so what do we do to worry about? You don't mind me picking on you, do you, John?
Okay. Absolutely not.
All right, cool. So what we do to compensate for that is we use loading techniques, and we use other electronic devices to load up the antenna so that we can transmit on 30 meters, 40 meters, 50 meters, and have a much smaller footprint. Okay, and basically all these are just capacitors and inductors. Okay, and I think I showed you guys capacitance hats. Did I show that to you last time? The ugliest things ever invented on the face of the earth, but they work fine. So they use loading coils, which is just wire wrapped around. So they'll have a length of wire. I hate this pen. Okay, so they'll have a length of wire, and then they'll wrap around electronically cable in this block, and what you see is this little block thing. All right, and then the antenna continues for another length of time. There's a mathematical formula to compute this, okay, when you start the coil and when you do not start the coil, but it's very effective. Is it as good as the 100-foot, 30-meter antenna? No, it is not, okay? Is it pretty good? It's pretty good, okay? Not excellent, it's pretty good. But again, we don't want a 100-foot antenna sticking out of the back of our car. Imagine if we made a right turn, we'd like kill every dog in the neighborhood with that kind of antenna, which would piss off the neighbors, so we don't want to do that, okay? So, all right, and then linear loading is actually what marine antennas use. It's very popular on boats because boats are so beautiful and sleek and shiny, you know, until you start paying the bills, okay? And they're gorgeous, and basically what they do is an antenna that loops back on itself. And if I can get this to work, come on. Come on. All right, so basically they're housed in a long tube, okay? And they're fiberglass, and the antenna just loops this way. And depending on the type of antenna, they loop this way. And for marine applications, what they do is when they ground the radio, it's hooked up to the actual zinc plate, the electrolytic plate on the bottom of the boat that creates the other half of the dipole, the other half of the antenna. But they're very sleek and beautiful. And the boat, again, the sacrificial elements such as zinc on the bottom of every boat, that acts as the counterpoise or the other half of the antenna. So that's called linear loading. And that's actually very, very effective. That's why boats get such great range. Additionally, they're on water, so there's very few obstructions, and the waves travel pretty cool. Random wire is exactly that, okay? You basically just take a random piece of a wire, however long you want to make it to be, and it's what I use, kind of, to be honest with you. Hold on. Yeah. So just a random piece of wire, whatever you want it to be, and then that ends in a connector, and you hook it up to your antenna tuner. You must have an antenna tuner, all right? If you don't, it will not work, and you'll blow up your radio, and then it goes to your radio. Just regular old, any length of wire. The problem with this is you put an enormous strain on the tuner, okay? And you can imagine that the impedance starts to increase. Since this circuit is AC, okay, as the length increases, so does the impedance. And it gets to a point where the impedance is so high that the tuner can't handle it anymore. And your SWR gets huge, okay? Standing wave ratio gets out of control. We discussed SWR in this class, right?
Yeah.
Forgive me. Yeah, okay. So, all right. So those are the things you want to watch out for, okay? And using this type of antenna may result in significant RF curtains and voltages on the station equipment that can cause RF burns. Absolutely. You touch that long wire and you accidentally hit transmit, it's going to hurt you really bad, depending on how many watts you're putting out. Also, even if you are not hitting transmit and you've transmitted for a while, like you're on digital, right? Like on Packet or something, and I just sent you the latest photos of the new Star Wars movie coming out. So the radio's been on for a while, and then you accidentally touch that wire, it'll be hot. It'll be very hot. So you have to be careful. That's the problem with random wire antennas. Okay. As we discussed, remember we did talk about this. Height is everything, right? So as the height increases, okay, the antenna starts to become more efficient, and I think we discussed this. And this is the pattern of an antenna at an eighth of a wavelength high, as opposed to half of a wavelength high. The antenna becomes more efficient in a linear fashion, so the coverage becomes a little bit better. Okay. And as you can see, as we start to increase the height of the antenna starts to perform a lot nicer. Okay. In this particular model, at an eighth of an inch high, the signal is reflected from the ground, and a lot of the signal goes straight up into the air. Okay. And a vertical, straight vertical, which I don't know of any countries that are straight up. Okay. So I don't know anybody that lives there. This is a more useful pattern. Okay. And again, we're talking about, a perfect isotropic dipole antenna or something like that. So you can see that height is important. We talked about polarization. You know about polarization. Yagi antennas. I showed you Dr. Yagi's picture. You know who he is. And then they talk about, let's see, this one talks about phasing in and out of phase. And I think Phil had asked the question last time, could I run multiple dipoles? And the answer was, you can, but you run into issues. The signals start to work against each other to a certain extent, if you remember. And also these zones are really, really, really dead. They're not kidding around dead. And it really causes a problem depending on what you're looking to accomplish. All right. Okay. Yagi structure. All right. So we talked about that, and I told you that we have different elements in the Yagi. I'm just reviewing, so we're all on the same page. And the Yagi is one of the most popular antennas. It's the basis of the dish antenna. It's how it works. It's really the same electronic theory. So the first element, the one behind us the most, is the reflective element, okay? And then we have the one that's actually hooked up to the radio, okay? That is the driven element, okay? And then we have parasitic elements. Well, they're all parasitic except for the driven one. And then these are known as the directive. And these are the ones that actually define the pattern of the antenna. And the antenna pattern looks something like this, roughly. All right. So when you hit transmit, it becomes almost like a funnel. And this is the type of antenna that you need to talk to the International Space Station most effectively. And you can build these very inexpensively out of PVC pipe and a measuring tape for just a couple of bucks, and they are extremely efficient, extremely efficient. And there's a ton of articles on the web on how to build Yagis. I built at least a dozen of them. They're a ton of fun, and even if you're on 2 meters, you'd be incredibly surprised. Just go to some place pretty high up, as high as you can get, and then just point the antenna in different directions. It's a ton of fun to play with, and that's the basic design of it. Okay, the other thing I want you to know, okay, and it's a pure memorization thing, because they love to ask the question, and it's their test, okay, is the last thing on the menu, and the last thing on the study sheet. 3-element Yagi maximum theoretical gain is 9.7 dB. Why you possibly need to know this, okay, and need to keep this as a piece of knowledge in your brain forever, okay, is totally beyond me. But they want you to know it, okay? I think the point that they're trying to make is why, when to use a Yagi component. And that's the reason. Okay. There are other antennas, okay, but there is no such thing as a perfect antenna, all right? So depending, you don't get something for nothing, unfortunately, in life, okay? So here they talk about the different components that make up the antenna and what the trade-off is. So you have to trade off, number one, having to ever talk to your neighbors again. That's always very important. Number two, if you have a significant other, the chances that you will survive after putting up a high-performance HF antenna is important too, okay? So these are the things you need to worry about, plus what you give up from an electronics perspective, okay? If we go to larger elements and we use bigger elements in our antenna, it necessarily increases SWR, okay? Where you place the antenna, okay, and the tuning of all the antenna components can adversely or positively, if you're good, affect SWR, okay? Impedance matching, we played with this, and this is the basic antenna tuner, and everybody's okay with SWR? I don't need to explain SWR? Yes? No? We're good?
Good.
All right, cool. All right, so the antenna tuner is a must, okay, when you go to HF, because you're not going to go out and be changing antenna lengths. So plan on that when you buy your radio, okay? Antenna tuners are anywhere from about $100 to $250. Some radios have the antenna tuners built in, okay? But count on buying one, because you will need one, okay? For 99.9% of the time. Okay, and again, this is another way of matching gamma performance and handling impedance. Not very practical, not the way it's done normally, but anymore. But yeah, it's fine. Okay. Anyway, loop antennas. These are really cool. Okay, so sometimes they're known as an Alex loop antenna. Sometimes it's just known as regular loop antennas. There's this one guy, he's a Russian guy, his name is Alex, and he says he invented this antenna. Actually, it's nothing new, okay? And it looks like this. And then inside it's got another little loop. Very tiny for what it does, okay? So this antenna can be like, this could be like an 80-meter. So instead of having 250 feet of cable, of wire running for a dipole, you have this tiny little loop. Excellent, excellent, excellent antenna. I don't say anything bad about it, except for one thing, okay? You have to have a controller on the antenna. And this controller has a bunch of capacitors. It could have a capacitor, an inductor, a whole bunch of stuff. It's extremely, extremely narrow band. So what does that mean to us in English? What that means to us in English is if I tune in a specific frequency, if I go to 80 meters and I go to my Alex, and I'm using an Alex loop antenna, okay? Every time I tune this, I'm going to have to make some adjustment, more or less, on the Alex loop. I'll pick a frequency, whatever I want to go to, like let's say this one, and then I won't hear anything, okay? I have to go to the antenna and then start playing with the antenna tuner on the Alex loop to hear it. Very good, and it's very nice, but it requires a lot of tuning, okay? So this is perfect for if we wanted to stay here all day. We're in a contest, okay, and we want to talk to as many people as we possibly can, and this is our spot. This is where we're going to hang out, okay? We would tune our Alex loop to get the best possible reception, and then we would stay here all day. If we're going to do this and go scanning back and forth and changing bands and all of this stuff, the Alex loop gets old really quick. That's the problem with the magnetic or Alex loop. Okay? Any questions? No? Good. All right, cool. You can mix them together. Okay? You can use them in array. All right? And you can use quad loops, and you can use all sorts of other stuff. Yeah, you can do that if you want. Okay. And there are other antennas that are very, very excellent. These quads, they're called quads because they have 4 sides, okay? And you can arrange them in different directions, horizontally, vertically, and all the sides on the feed point. So the feed point here on this makes it horizontal, and these lines are horizontal to the, perpendicular to the ground, okay? And these are not, there is no perpendicular line to the ground. Feed points can be here, okay? So this would be a vertically polarized, okay? There is one antenna that I'm not sure that, yeah, they do. So I won't get ahead of myself. NVIS, near vertical skywave, okay, is when you want to transmit the signals straight up. So this is a near vertical wave antenna. It's very simple, okay? So the antenna is this way, okay? And it's designed to only transmit in this direction. Actually, it doesn't go straight up. It's actually at a slight angle. And the radio waves go straight up. This NVIS is great for long distance, okay? It's like a dipole for long distance. It's very good. But if you want to talk to somebody maybe 200 or 300 miles away, it'll never reach. And the reason is this NVIS antenna goes literally just about, and not 100% straight up, but let's say it's a 90-degree angle to the atmosphere, and it lives on the bounce technique. That's what it does, okay? But it's pretty cool if you want to go pretty far away. All right, and it's just another antenna design. We could spend months talking about antenna design. I mean, this is my favorite part of amateur radio, and I'm always looking to build a better antenna. And since I have access to nuclear medicine, I did build the perfect antenna, the perfect dipole, just about. I was a little bit off. The only problem is it's slightly illegal, and the first time that it rains, it melts the antenna. Other than that, it was perfect. It was like the perfect design, okay? Anyway, yes, you can stack antennas, you can stack Yagis, and the only thing you really need to know is vertically stacking antennas increases the gains and narrows the elevation bandwidth. What does this mean? This means, I think this was on my test when I took it. So hold on, I'm trying to switch to a pen here, folks. All right, so if you have a Yagi here and you have a Yagi here and a Yagi here, yeah, you'll get a little bit more forward gain if this is the direction that we're going in, okay? But it'll make the beam even narrower. So if a regular Yagi had this kind of beam traveling through, and you have this kind of length, stacking them together decreases the bandwidth. This is the bandwidth that you would have if you stack Yagis together. Some people do that, okay, when they want to reach as far as they possibly can. All right. I think that's, hold on. Let me not get ahead of myself. So yeah, so here's how we stack them. There's an example of them. Or you can stack them this way if you like. Okay. And again, it produces more gain in the main lobe. And it is 2 Yagis stacked vertically on the same mast. 2 Yagis is stacked horizontally. And again, if you can get away with this, having this type of antenna at your house, awesome. In my neighborhood, it ain't happening. All right. Log periodic tables. Yeah. So log periodic antennas are basically the old-fashioned TV antenna. They have a very consistent radiation pattern. They are just beautiful. They work really, really well. Okay. Downsides of them, they are very fussy as to the frequencies, okay, that you can play with. And log periodic tables, they don't give you as wide of a range. So you have to be careful. They won't cover a huge range of frequencies, okay? Beverage antennas, no, it wasn't made out of beer cans. It was made by this guy, Harold Beveridge, okay? The antenna is okay. It works okay. It's a long wire, very close to the ground, okay? That's what's known as a Beveridge antenna, and it terminates with a resistor, and that's what it looks like. It's okay. It's not super duper, you know, not super efficient, but it's okay. Okay. And it has this kind of radiation pattern. Its a big advantage is you don't have to go too high. 20 feet off the ground is fine. Okay. And as you can see, its biggest limitation, it's exclusively used for receiving on the lower HF bands. Okay. And the Beveridge antenna has high ground losses. It's too inefficient for use as a transmitting antenna. So the big thing is that it's receiving mostly. This is not absolutely correct. There have been people who have used Beveridge antennas for transmitting. It doesn't work well, and it really isn't accepted as a transmitting antenna, but it does okay as a receiving antenna. So when you buy a shortwave radio, they give you this length of wire, and you clip it onto the antenna of the radio. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Maybe next class, if we have one, I'll show it to you. You can buy it on Amazon, and the idea is just to hang it off of a door or something, and that's how you improve HF reception using a shortwave radio. Multiband antennas, that's what I use, okay? And they use a have to have an tuner. Have to have an antenna tuner. They also use this trap mechanism, and really what the trap is a type of coiling. Okay, so as you can see, this is an inductor and this is a capacitor, and that's what makes up the trap, and it electronically handles making the antenna a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. They actually work really, really well. Are they perfect? Not really. Okay. So a good single band antenna will outperform a multi-band antenna significantly, but you know, who wants to be stuck on one band? You know, I get nauseous being on one band because the bands do different things. So some people swear on 20 meters. I swear at 40 meters. I love 40 meters. I love the the diversity of topics that are discussed. A lot of contesting on 40 meters, true. There's a lot of contesting on all the bands. All right, anyway, you'll hear GR5 That's the most popular multi-band antenna. It's what I have. They have the GR5 Junior, which is a smaller antenna. It works okay. It's not as efficient as a straight dipole, but again, you can tune a lot of different bands on it, assuming you have a good antenna tuner. Okay. Feed lines. Okay. Every time you add another line, some other component from your radio to the antenna, it's going to increase the impedance. Okay. These are the different antenna connectors that you can use. Okay. You can use this one. This is the old-fashioned TV line, but you're going to have a tough time matching it. Okay. And you can use 75 ohm, but again, you're going to need a transformer to get it down to 50 ohms. The most popular that we use is just coax cable. Okay. And blah, 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 SWR. You don't need any help with that. So we've discussed that already. If you have any questions, now's the time. Impedance matching, basically just an antenna tuner. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. This is the characteristic impedance of the most popular lines that you can use and how much they lose, how many dB they lose over distance. Okay. Let's see if there's anything in here that you really need to know. Yes.
Yeah, can I ask a question about the coax just quickly?
Sure. What
is the difference between RG8X and RG8U?
Great question. RG8U is a little bit harder to work with. It's a little tougher to get through. The shielding is a little bit tougher. And I've never played with it, to be honest with you, but I understand it's a little tougher to work with, a little bit tougher to get the connector going on it. That's what I've been told.
But as far as performance, I mean, is it a better performing cable than the 8X, or is it pretty much the same and you're just...
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what the specs are. I've never used it. I never had the opportunity to use it. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've used LMR. I can tell you that this is great. Okay, this is a real pain in the butt to work with connectors. I can tell you that, but it's a great cable. I've never used 8U. I'm sorry, and I have no experience with 8U at all. It just never came up. It never came up for me. You know what? But I just wrote myself a note. I'm going to look into it. I should know this. Feed line loss. Okay. All feed lines create attenuation. They all have loss. We want to be careful. We want to keep the feed line as short as we possibly can. All right, that's obviously important. You want to be careful about coiling, wrapping up the feed line. My wife put up a dipole in one of our other rooms, just hanging out the window, and she had coiled up the feed line, the ladder line feed line, and she was getting horrible performance, and she didn't understand that coiling up caused a huge attenuation. So even though she was putting out 100 watts on 40 meters, the SWR was off the wall, even with the antenna tuner. Okay. All right, and that's exactly what happened to her. Higher feed line loss also affects SWR. Okay, so you got to be careful with that. Generally keep the feed line as short as possible. Okay, propagation. Okay, so basically, we're going to talk about the same thing you considered when you took your technicians. Okay, however, there are some things that you need to know. Okay, and they're highlighted here under the propagation section. These are the only things that you really need to take away from this chapter, but you need to know them, okay? So when we talk about the A index, okay, we're talking about long-term geomagnetic stability. What's happening over an 11-year cycle, okay? So what areas can we transmit in and receive properly, and what areas can we not? The K index is the local or I'm sorry, the short term within the next few days or a month stability. And we're going to talk about that. That should be coming up here, okay? Okay. This is a review from your technician's class, okay? We have the D layer, 30 to 60 miles in altitude. We have the E layer, 60 to 70 miles straight up. And then you guys remember the F and F2 and all of that stuff. So it's the different components of the atmosphere. Okay. F2 layer, and this defines it pretty well. Okay. F layer, 100 to 300 miles in altitude. Yeah, you don't need to know that. Okay, for the test. The higher F2 layer, so the maximum height is reached at noon in the summer when the sun is overhead. Okay, so F2 is at its greatest when the maximum height is reached at noon in the summer when the sun is overhead. So that's here. All right, cool. All right, just talking to myself here. All right, so reflection and absorption, okay. Know when things will be absorbed and when things will be reflected back, okay. So if we're here in I guess this is the state of Washington, right? And we're talking to, I guess this would be like Paris, right? So what really happens here is the signals are not bounced off exactly as we said they would be. It's not a direct angle like this. Because of the geometric and geomagnetic stability of the Earth, the signals are actually bent to a certain extent. Not all of the radio signals, okay, but a lot of them are. Some signals will keep going depending on the band that you're on and go out into space. And does anybody know how far they go?
No.
They go forever. Yeah, forever. Yeah, they go forever. So if you're pissed off at your boss and you say something on HF, there may be a guy on some planet someplace 100 years from now who's going to hear that conversation. Just what you should know. Anyway, so, and then these are the different waves and the critical angles. The point behind this whole hoopla is it depends on what you're trying to do, okay? Depends on who you're wanting to talk to. It depends on the geomagnetic stability of the Earth. That's when that K index and that A index become important. So again, some people live just to talk to every country in the world. There is a certificate you get if you speak to all the countries in the world, with the exception of North Korea at the moment. So getting the antenna to follow critical angles or specific angles is important. Okay. All right. The enemy of propagation is absorption, and that occurs in the D and E regions of the atmosphere. Okay, and it depends on the band that you're on. All right, and during the day, signals tend to be absorbed more than they are at night. Okay, skywave and ground wave propagation. Every time we reflect something over the ionosphere, it's called a hop. Okay, and we can get that to happen in different ways, and sometimes that's called a skip. This is not unique to HF. This happens on 2 meters and 440 and 70 centimeters all the time. So at Limark, even though our repeaters are Long Island based, I have frequently spoken to people in Nevada for some reason, or people crossing the Mojave Desert. And for some reason, on some days, I pick them up and you can hear them as clearly as you can hear me now. Okay? And that's just the way it is, okay? And the things that you want to know is hops that use the E layer go up to about 1,200 miles because of lowering reflecting height. Also, you want to know that skywave propagation is multiple hops. So the way that would look, if I were to draw it out, remember, I did not win any awards for art, guys. Okay. So the way that would work, oh, come on, is this is the atmosphere. The Earth is here, right? Paris, New York. Okay. I could send waves and they'll propagate like this, multiple hops. That's skywave propagation. And that happens sometimes, okay? And that's how that's known. Anyway. Hold on. Okay, skywave signals also have a characteristic sound caused by the variations in density and height as they occur in the ionosphere. It's not smooth and stable, and you can hear that swooshing noise. You can hear them fade in and fade out, even though you don't move frequencies. You'll hear that like a phaser. You'll hear a phasing sound. Ground wave signals travel along the surface of the Earth, okay, and they're okay, and they're most popular. They hug the ground, and they're most popular on 40 meters. Okay, long and short path. Everybody knows what that is. Very simple. Okay, 2 ways to reach you. Okay. All right. So I'm here. All right, and Phil is here. All right, and I want to talk to Phil, and I'll send the signal this way. Maybe. But for some reason, there's this big, gigantic building in the way, okay? And I can't get to speak to Phil. So sometimes I'll point my antenna, my Yagi antenna, 180 degrees away from where I want to go. And it'll just go around this way and reach Phil this way. Long wave propagation, okay? That's possible. And it happens more often than you think. So when you want to really talk to somebody, you point the antenna 180 degrees, if it's a directional antenna, 180 degrees from the person you're trying to actually reach, and sometimes that works. Okay? All right. Here's a question that they love to ask, and I want to make sure that you understand that. Okay? So there's 2 types of radiation. Okay? So there's ionized and non-ionized radiation. Okay, ultraviolet and X-rays travel at the speed of light. Okay, 186,000 miles per second, 300 million meters per second. Okay, so if the sun is upset with us and sends out a dose of X-rays, they will arrive at the Earth 8 minutes later. Okay, when there's a coronal mass ejection, a sunspot, what we commonly call a sunspot, that just travels at whatever it travels, and that can take between 20 and 40 hours to arrive at the Earth. The reason they want you to know this is they don't want you to get frustrated when you're trying to have HF communications. And if you see on the DX sites, the long distance sites, that there's been an X-ray emission, okay, it's come and gone in 8 minutes. It doesn't bother us so much, okay? Coronal mass ejections are a much bigger problem. They happen all the time, okay? And they take a while to get here. They take a couple of days. They can take a day or a couple of days to get here, and a day or a couple of days to get rid of. So if you're dying to talk to Japan, and there's a coronal mass ejection, and they post it, you're not going to get through, okay? They are so intense and so energetic. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that. You'll get an email from your cable company, or you'll be trying to tune in some station on cable or dish network, and it'll say, due to atmospheric conditions, we can't make this connection now. That's because of coronal mass ejections. It is not unusual at its peak for it to take down all communications, all of it. Yes, that's police, that's fire, that's aircraft. They're all affected by it. Okay? So make sure that you take that into consideration. Where do you get this information from? From any of the DX sites. Okay. All right.
You have
Yes, go ahead.
you have a chat question.
Sure, I do. All right, hold on. Let me find chat. Chat. Cool. EPM is EPM. EPM, heaven forbid. Oh my God. Electromagnetic pulse will occur when somebody's stupid enough to set off a nuclear explosion of some kind of catastrophic thing like that, or there could be other. I can't even imagine it. So what happens is, besides the explosion that occurs, what happens before the explosion, just before the explosion, is a huge electromagnetic pulse. All of the radios that you have in your possession at the moment, well, every electronic device you have, is rendered useless. That's it. Use them for planters, door stops, they will no longer work. All the components in them are totally polarized. The only thing that will survive, ironically, is a tube, as an old-fashioned tube. They are not affected by electromagnetic pulses. So so no, they're not exactly the same. Well, they're not exactly the same, but they are the same. So CME, coronal mass ejections, are really as a result of nuclear explosions on the surface of the sun. So generally, the principle is very similar, okay? The intensity is not quite as bad, and CMEs are short-lived. They come and they go. Electromagnetic pulse, again, it's relative to where we are on the Earth, right? So electromagnetic pulse is a much shorter distance, right? A nuclear explosion would affect 100 miles, 30 miles. I'm not a nuclear physicist, but, however is the length of the explosion, and it's more intense, but it's much shorter in distance. I hope that answered the question. EMPs are shorter in distance, 50 miles, 100 miles. CMEs are not quite as energetic, but they travel millions of miles. Okay? And they kind of work on the same principle a little bit. Okay? This is the solar cycle. The solar cycle has 11 years. Okay? Oh, I finally figured out who GCCJN is. Hi, Albert. Sorry about that. All right. Let's see. So during this 11-year cycle, UV is being generated. X-rays are being generated. It's very important that you understand the difference between them. Okay? And the question will be, they'll ask you some trick question, like X-rays take, and then they'll say 20 to, how long the X-rays take to arrive at the Earth, and they'll put in 20 to 40 hours, 10 minutes, blah, blah, blah. Remember that UVs and X-rays travel at the speed of light, and the sun is exactly 8 light minutes away. Okay? All right. And that's about it. Again, there are bands that tend to be best depending on the time of the day that you wish to broadcast. Okay. That's why 20 meters, 17 meters is popular, because they're basically open, means that they work well. Okay. Anytime, 24 hours a day. Okay. And the other ones, 15, 12, and 10 meters, they work pretty good during the day, okay? And 40 and 30, I don't care what this says, they work a lot better at night. And the long distance ones, 60, 80, and 100, really work best at early morning, just a little bit earlier than sunrise, okay? All right, solar activity, as I explained to you, we have this stuff, the A index and the K index, and then the measurement of solar flux itself. It's a relative measurement, like dB is to signal strength, okay? And but what they really want you to know is solar flux is always measured at 10.7 centimeters, okay? And that's the math. There's a mathematical reason for that, which I will not discuss with you. I will just make you crazy, okay? So the question, that's why it's on the study sheet, okay? Here it says solar flux radio energy that's measured at 10.7 centimeters, and they just want you to know how they compute it, the solar flux index, okay? K index we discussed, A index, okay? And they kind of tell you how you can expect the arrival of your signal to be, and how you can expect the reception to be. So it gives you kind of a heads up as to what's going to happen. And again, you want to be able to assess where to spend your time. They have two different measurements for that. They have MUF, maximum usable frequency, and lowest usable frequency, okay? And they're predictions. They're just predictions. So they take out their crystal ball and they rub it, and they whatever, and they say, okay, this is where this stuff's going to be. So, for example, they may issue, you may want to be on 40 meters, and then they'll say, hey, the lowest usable frequency, the LUF, here on this particular one is 7.025. And the maximum usable frequency is 7.225, which means don't waste your time going any place up here or down here, okay? Because atmospheric conditions are such that it's not going to work for you, okay? And actually they do some excellent modeling with this, computer modeling of this, and they can pretty much predict where you can reach and how long it's going to take you to get there, and all sorts of cool stuff. So if you're into the math of it, this is actually a pretty cool measuring system, a predictor. It's like a weather report for radio signals, okay? And it'll tell you which band will give you the most satisfaction, the most contacts, or whatever's happening. It's very, very cool, okay? I just want you to know that this exists, okay? And this DX Foundation in California, hey, listen, I'm not a huge California fan, but when you have to give it up, you have to give it up. These guys are fantastic, okay? The DX Foundation in California. These are pretty heavy-duty minds and pretty heavy-duty scientists. And they're also responsible for the beacons all over HF. And they can give you excellent propagation information, all right? Solar disturbances, solar flares, coronal holes, coronal mass injections. We discussed all of this stuff. Sorry about that, guys. Let's see. And then we have some sudden ionospheric disturbance, known as SIDS, and they're responsible for total radio blackouts, okay? They just happen. And what causes them to happen? All sorts of things, okay? It could be a solar flare, once in a blue moon solar flare. And remember, any type of radiation arrives 8 minutes early. This is going to be the question. I promise you'll get it, okay? And here's this question. Every exam has this question. Approximately how long does it take the increased ultraviolet and X? 8 minutes. You see ultraviolet, you see X-ray, 8 minutes. That's the answer. Okay, folks? Don't forget. It's on every freaking exam I've seen. Even when they change the question pool, it's still there. Yes.
Just a theoretical question on that. The coronal mass ejection, that's actually particles, right? Whereas the waves are energy waves, so they're going to travel at the speed of light, whereas particles can only travel as fast as a particle can travel. They're going to travel much slower, right? Is that basically why there's a different arrival time between a CME and a X-ray or something from a solar flare?
Yeah, it has to. So that's what I did one of my masters on. It actually has to do with how you're exactly correct. How the energy is delivered, okay, and the energy that's sent by X-ray and UV is photonic in nature. So it's actually sent to us via photons, okay, as opposed to coronal mass ejections, which are electromagnetic waves. And again, I could spend a ton of time explaining that to you. I love this stuff, by the way. So it's the wrong topic to get me started on. We could spend the rest of the year talking about that.
I'll have to buy you a beer someday, Joe. And you can...
Yeah. Yeah, so I've done a lot of work with photon technology. I'm not the ultimate expert, but I've worked with some incredibly brilliant minds in the area of photons, which we don't know a lot about, but we do know that actually they are particles sometimes, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're energy. They do all sorts of weird stuff. And yeah, that's exactly correct. So the delivery is photonic versus electromagnetic. Yeah, very good. Whoever asked that question. Was that you, Phil? Who asked the question?
Yeah, I have to admit it. Yep. Yeah.
You know, Phil, you should give up the lawyer stuff and go into science. You know, like get like a real job. You know what I'm saying? You've got the mind for it, man. Let me tell you. That's a great question. That was a great question. Yeah, that's exactly right. All right. Anyway, wait a minute, went too fast. Blah blah blah. So we were talking about SIDS, okay, and that occurs again. Solar flares. You know, I'm not a prepper, guys. I'm just not a prepper. But you know what? Radio frequencies blank out for the weirdest reasons. You know, and it's like, well, you know, the HF gases from the swamps, you know, bounced off the light of Saturn, and I don't know about that. But anyway, we are subject to some radio blackouts, and they do affect all radio, and including TV. Okay, so be aware of that. All right. Anyway, solar flare radiation. You know, that's an incredible engine we have up here. This guy is really producing some serious energies, and again, it's not stable. Everybody expects to see the sun and not see the sun, and we've only been around for what 10, 15,000 years. That's nothing in the in the cosmic timetable, and the sun sometimes gets some energy, and that's what happens with solar flare radiation. And Phil, I don't drink, but I'll let you buy me a Coke, and yeah, we'll get together and I'll explain photon, what I understand is photon theory, and I have a whole bunch of books that I assisted in writing, and it's very cool. Anyway,
Fair enough.
All right, cool. Geomagnetic disturbances, and again, they're caused because of the Earth's magnetic core, okay? And it's invisible, and most people walk around, don't even know that it's happening, but that electromagnetic core, or that geomagnetic core more accurately, changes, okay? It varies. It's not consistent, okay? So know that as well. All right, so the point behind all of this is that there are many things that can cause your propagation to change, okay? One of the coolest things that I had the pleasure of working with is the aurora borealis. I went to Alaska several years ago and started to transmit. I didn't see the aurora borealis. I won't tell you that I did, but I was able to bounce radio signals off of it, and it was really, really cool. And I could tell by the sound of it that I had hit the aurora borealis. So you can bounce off of almost anything. And that's what they call scatter modes, all right? In scattering modes, you can bounce off of the Earth's atmosphere. You can bounce off of meteorites. You can bounce off of, you name it, you can bounce it off. You can bounce signals off the moon. I have done that, okay? Not very efficiently, but I have done that, okay? And certainly bounce off of satellites, all different ways to scatter. So the idea here is, and I suggest you look at this, not just to pass the test, but look at this a little bit more closely and study it, because it gives you hints on how to get, heaven forbid, we do have electromagnetic pulse. Oh, God, hope not. Electromagnetic pulsing. You need to talk to somebody. You really need to understand the effects of propagation. I mean, that was a terrible thing to say. I'm sorry. I apologize. But it tells you how to get the most propagation. All right. Heaven forbid we have something that horrible happen. Anyway, and then NVIS we talked about, and NVIS relatively short antennas, so they're only an 1/8 to 1/4 wave high, and they rely 100% on skipping, right? So that skipping is the radio signal will bounce off the. Come on. So this is the Earth, right? And so NVIS antennas. Here's Phil in New York, and here I am in Paris, okay? So it's going to rely on bouncing off of multiple times, multiple skips. And it's actually a very good antenna, and it's pretty small, which is a beautiful thing, okay? So again, each antenna has its pros and cons, and you have to decide, it's the old saying, the right tool for the right job, okay? So depending on what you want. Okay, last chapter, real basic and quick. And I'm going to leave you in exactly 25 minutes. I have no problem, guys. I'm going to send out an email at the end of the class. I am more than happy to go over the exams with you. I told you about hamstudy.org. If you guys get stuck and you want me to run another class this week, I don't know when you guys are planning to take your test, I'm more than happy to take the test with you and explain the answers if you don't get it, okay? So I'm not going to say this is the last class. I'll leave it open. I have no other classes running until May, so if you want me to spend more time with you, I'll be more than happy to. I do apologize that this week has been so rushed, but that sometimes happens. All right, electrical safety. Don't touch capacitors, okay? All right, cool. Next thing. Be careful when you solder something, all right? All solder has lead in it. It's just the way it is, okay? You don't want to inhale it. You don't want to, that causes brain damage, okay? So you want to make sure that the air is well vented. They make soldering exhaust fans, so if you're going to do very close work, be careful with that, okay? Electrical shock. Don't touch the capacitors. Did I mention that to you? Okay, cool. All right. Be careful about grounding things. Okay. And I think there's a chart coming up that's going to scare you. Okay, yeah, this is it. Okay. So this is what it'll take to kill you. Okay. This is, remember an ampere, right? Remember an amp? This is how many? It's a millionth of an amp. 150 millionth of an amp can cause respiratory arrest and cardiac distress. Death is possible. Okay? You don't see anything here about wattage. You only see about amperage. Right? That's why the old saying is, it's not the wattage, but the amperage that'll kill you. That's exactly correct. All right? Again, you're the big guys now, right? So you're going to have pretty cool power supplies. I know Phil just can't wait to go out and get a new radio and a power supply. He's going to be transmitting an HF. Please be careful, okay? That's the whole purpose of this class, all right? If you're going to open it up, make sure you know what a capacitor looks like. You know about the discharge, bleeder, resistors, and you have computed the safe time to handle a capacitor, the discharge time of capacitors over time, okay? They suggest you have some kind of CPR training before you go into the power supply. American Red Cross offers 5-minute CPR courses, which are excellent. If you haven't taken one, take one. What do we know about wiring? Okay, make sure you have the right size wire for the amperage that you're using. So most power supplies are 30 amp, okay? What I'm running right now is 30 amp, so it should be American Wire Gauge, that's what AWG stands for, is number 10. And 30 amp circuit breaker or fuse. Okay. All right, ground, make sure that all the ground is common ground. Okay, don't ever get rid of this third guy. All right, I have seen some ham radio operators. I've been a ham for 59 years. And what he does, the first thing he does is he clips off this ground wire. Be careful with it. Because remember, we're now a radio station. We're transmitting. The rules, the consumer rules, the, residential rules no longer are applicable in our case. We are we're not mini, we're radio stations. So we got to be careful with things like ground potential, all right? It's very important. All right, and this is the different plugs that you've seen, all right? This one's being in the back of a computer, right? That's the most common. They have all different configurations, none of which are on the exam, okay? Yes.
I've been trying to learn a little bit more about grounding, and I'm trying to figure out, like, what's the recommended, like, a ground strap? Is it like a weave, like a flat weave or something like that? I think that's what I've been seeing,
yes,
but I'm not...
Yeah, we're going to get into that in just a little bit, I think. Yeah,
okay.
So it's a strap, okay? And again, shortest distance possible, no sharp angles. These are all questions on the test and good grounding practice. And depending on the load that you have, thank heaven that the new modern radios don't take up a lot of power, so we don't have to get rid of a lot of power. We don't have to deal with a lot of ground differential. So they're not as bad as tube radios once were. Okay, so yeah, well, I think we'll get into that in just a little bit. Okay, fuses and circuit breakers, you know what that is, right? Anybody have any? Please don't stick a penny in that. All right, you know that. All right, I'm not even going to insult you guys by telling you that. Okay, fuses, okay, blow a fuse, you replace the fuse, that's great. Find out why the fuse blew on the first time, okay? The fuse will not blow unless there's a reason for it. If you have everything correct, this should only be the original fuse that came with the equipment. It should last you your whole life. If it didn't, something else happened. Remember that. So you have to be a detective, okay? All right, cool. Shock prevention, GFI circuits, by law, it's federal law. GFI circuits have to be with anything that's within 4 feet of water, okay? So those are those things with the little circuit, those outlets with the little circuit breaker stuff in there. And they are designed, that's why they're so expensive, to respond extremely fast, okay? Somewhere around 500 milliseconds they respond. They see that you're going to get shocked, okay? So you have one hand on the faucet and the other one you're trying to turn on the toaster, okay? It will predict that, and within 500 milliseconds, it will trip the breaker, okay? So anytime you're near water, important to know, okay? Also, safety interlocks, that's when you're climbing a tower. You'll see that happen. There'll be a power grid and there'll be a safety interlock, which means that you have to push a lever and then push another lever, or you'll have to push a lever with one hand and a lever with the other hand in order to turn the power on or off, mostly on, okay? Okay, so this is an example of a GFI circuit, and it's a little pushy thing, all right? And they are absolutely one of the best inventions ever made, okay? All right, generators are not electricity. They're not the same, okay? We would have to get into phasing, how electricity is handled in phasing to discuss that. But the most important thing is all generators, yes, even that beautiful Honda generator that doesn't make any noise, emits carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is odorless, colorless. You can't tell that it's there and will easily kill you, okay? So be careful with that, okay? All right, cool. Keep your generator in a well-ventilated area. This is not as stupid as it sounds, folks, okay? We did have an incident here on Long Island, Superstorm Sandy. It was cold, it was miserable, it was rainy. and there was an amateur radio operator who was trying to do the right thing and put his generator in the garage. He just barely escaped with his life and the life of his family. Okay? He was poisoning his family with carbon monoxide. Don't think it doesn't happen. It does. Okay? And it was well-meaning. All right. Circuit breakers, everybody knows what they look like. I'm not going to worry about this too much. Lightning. Okay. So we have this long pole sticking up out of the ground, out of your house, straight up into the air. That's pretty tall. Guess what it does? It's got a little sign. You don't see it, but it's got an invisible. It says lightning this way. Okay, so it's by definition a lightning ground. Okay, so you want to make sure that this is grounded properly, and they refer to this as a short metal strap to answer Phil's question. Okay, and it's normally woven. Yes, and it's woven so you can bend with it a little bit. Okay. But they also make specific lightning arresters. So the way it works is, okay, the radio signal goes in, it has this lightning arrestor built in, okay, and it will, if it's hit by lightning, it will be damaged, but it won't complete the circuit, and the lightning gets stuck in here. Remember, lightning is incredibly powerful, all right? So these are sacrificial elements which will never see the light of day again if they're hit by lightning, but they're well worth it. This is the question that you need to know for the exam, okay? So the rules are simple. Short, no turns, okay? No sharp turns, and you must have a common ground. This is what they mean when they say lightning grounds should be bonded to other safety grounds. Common ground. Everything in your house for maximum safety should be attached to some common ground. That could be a cold water pipe, it could be a specific ground that they use, it could be a rod that's been hammered in 10 feet. Okay? All right. Okay, guys. Bottom line. Radio transmissions are safe. Okay? They're non-ionizing radiation. That said, okay, does everybody know how a microwave works? Yes? No?
No.
Okay. Microwave is a radio transmitter. It transmits microwaves. Okay? So, I want you to use some common sense here, right? You hit that transmit button, you're sending out high energy electromagnetic waves, okay? I don't want you to be 2 feet from your antenna and hang out all day. I don't care if you're on 2 meter, 60 meter, it doesn't matter, okay? You got to be careful with RF exposure. Now, if you're inside and your antenna is 50 feet away on the roof of your house, I'm not so worried, okay? But some of us live in apartments, okay? And the antenna we're using, whether it's 2 meter or 40 meters, is just a few feet away from us, okay? Be careful with that, okay? And as you get more into HF, and remember, I got to worry about guys who have unlimited funds and they want to talk to Jupiter, and that's just the way it is, and that's what they're going to do, okay? So they buy these amplifiers. Remember, you got 1,500 watts to play with, all right? You want to be careful. You want to be careful not only with yourself, you want to be careful with those around you, okay? You don't want to be just transmitting this energy without any measure of responsibility or concern. It doesn't work that way, folks, okay? So they came up with this specific absorption rate, and that's why you take this class, okay? That's why you study this manual. You need to understand that you're transmitting, a radio station, okay? And you need to understand that you need to worry about this a little bit, okay? And here they talk about maximum permissible exposure, okay? And you can see it varies depending on the frequency that you're on, okay? Be careful with this, okay? Remember, and go back to the radio, how radio waves work, right? So the longer the waves are, all right? So the lower the number here, right? So we're here, we're at 80 meters, okay, or 160 meters, all right? Remember, these waves are, they look like this. I hate this thing. So these waves are like this, very long waves, okay? And then in opposition to that, we have this guy, okay? And that wave, as soon as I can get my pen working, all right, so it's 400 times this, okay? And that isn't even 400 times. So there's a lot more here than there is here, okay? These go further. These will travel further, okay? These penetrate things further. Microwave is way up there and uses a special transmitter tube called a magnetron, okay? And they very minute, tiny waves in the hundreds of thousands or millions of megahertz, but they can penetrate anything, okay? And that's the principle by which they heat. So understand that depending on the frequency that you pick, okay, your exposure varies, all right? I'm not trying to scare you to death. I'm really not. It's very, very safe. I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't safe, all right? But I just want you to know that there is, there is an exposure limit you want to be careful with, especially if, if you have a woman come in, she's pregnant, or somebody with a pacemaker. Be careful. Use your brain, okay? All radios have a duty cycle, okay? And it's important that you recognize that you can't just hit the transmit and leave it transmitting for an hour at a time. The average duty cycle for the average radio is only about 12 minutes per hour. So the average radio, okay, you should transmit for 12 minutes out of an hour, okay? That's a long time. You don't think it is, but that's a very long time. On the cheap Baofeng radios, 2 meter and 70 centimeter radios, if you hit the transmit button for longer than 30 seconds, the display disappears because it starts to heat up. Okay, so be careful with this, all right? So you have controlled and uncontrolled environments. So the environment around your dwelling is considered control. If you go out into a field or a park and you try to transmit, that's considered uncontrolled, okay? Because you never know who's going to walk in and out of it. Be careful, okay? All right. All right, and then they talk about duty cycles. And all of these different formats have different, or different modes have different duty cycles, okay? And you can compute the stuff. These computations are not required for the exam, all right? And then you should always estimate how much power you're putting out and what the electromagnetic RF interference is going to be, not interference, but exposure limits are. Just know that they exist. Take them into consideration is what I'm suggesting to you, okay? And multi-transmitter environments, again, if you're out on field day, which I strongly suggest, if you've never been to a field day, I strongly suggest you go to one. Obviously, you're multiplying the problem, okay? Again, I'm not suggesting that you're going to hit transmit and going to grow another head. That's not what's going to happen, but just be careful. You get into it, you don't realize how long you've been transmitting, especially in digital modes, all right? You and I are having a conversation. You want to be careful how long you're exposed. There is always leakage, all right? So even though your antenna is 50 feet away, at the connector, there's RF leakage. Again, please don't be concerned. I've been doing this a very, very long time, and I don't have any ill effects, nor do I know anybody who has ill effects, but, just be careful. Well, I'm a QRP guy, so I have nothing to worry about, okay? All right, so never plug in your radio without an antenna, okay? And if you must, for tests, you should have a dummy load, which is someplace for the energy to go. All right. So if you turn on your radio without an antenna, I don't care whose radio it is, I don't care what brand it is, I don't care how much you pay paid for it and you hit transmit, especially at 100 watts, which most radios put out, I absolutely positively guarantee you double your money back, if I'm wrong, will blow up your radio. You'll blow up the final amplifier, okay? Please make note of that, okay? Trust me, if you think that I haven't done this, I have, okay? I have lots of radios and only a couple of antennas, and I use these switches to switch, and I have inadvertently not switched the radio I was working on to an antenna, and I've blown them up. So I know firsthand that this is absolutely correct, okay? Installing antennas, stay away from all power lines. You don't want to go near it. You don't want to go near any of these. This sucker here happens to be one big mother oil-filled capacitor, okay? This will easily kill you, your dog, and most of the people on your block, okay? Please be careful, okay? So as tempting as these are, no. Okay. Tower masts and hardware, I think they have, this is the official attire, okay, of what you should wear, and no kidding around. People slip and fall from these towers. These towers can be anywhere from 50 to 500 feet high. I mean, they're crazy. Always work with somebody, and make sure that you have all the lockout circuits enabled. That's what this is about. Make note of this question, please. Okay, and never go up any tower in a storm. And that's just, here's a lockout example. This is very common, so you can't accidentally turn the circuit on. All right, you need two people with keys, two different keys. Notice that. And then this is also locked as well. All right, cool. And I think that's it. We're done. Questions? No? Yes? Okay. If there's no questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out an email